Let's move on to talk about Max and Sergio. And as I said in the intro, the brewing potential title battle that we maybe not do have on our hands. Certainly at the moment, it's 2-2 in, 2 wins each across the season. Maybe 3-2 if you include Perez's win in the sprint, although I'm sure Max wouldn't include that. Hockey Life on Instagram would like to know, is Checo 100% a title contender against Max now? Rach, go on, take it away. Do you see Checo as that title contender?
I do. I think he does. But I found it fascinating at the weekend watching their body language, because I love watching people's body language. I know a lot of the guys laugh at me sometimes for trying to pick up on things, but it was just so interesting because I felt like, firstly, the incident with Max and George, Max's response to that, his responses on Saturday, he was really riled up. And it wasn't just the incident with George, I don't feel. It's because his teammate won a race. I mean, Blake knows this better than anybody probably and can tell us more, but his teammate won a race and drivers hate that. And then when I spoke to Sergio on Saturday, he was really calm and he was really, you wouldn't have known he'd just won the sprint. He was very, very measured in his responses. He didn't even smile in my interview, to the point where I was thinking, it's like he's just been told to give up the win of a race, not he's actually won a race. So I mentioned this to him on Sunday after the race, and there's just this steely determination in him, this resilience in him, that just makes me feel like he is going to push Max a lot harder this season than he's ever done before. And I think, could be wrong, but I think that's starting to filter through to Max a little bit as well. Checo was unbelievable at the weekend. I think even without the safety car, he would have won that race yesterday. I think he would have beaten Max on that track yesterday. But there is a resilience in him that I think I haven't seen it to this level before. So, yes, I think he's going to push him a lot harder this season. Let's not forget, I mean, Max is amazing. Max is an incredible Formula One driver, and a lot is going to play into his hands in terms of tracks and his skill and his confidence. But I would like to think it's going to go a lot longer this season than it has done in the past.
Yeah, sort of Monaco last year, wasn't it? I think the peak for Perez, and then after that,
it dipped off, didn't
it? Max took a stronghold on that championship. Blake, come on, you've worked with both of these guys. You must know them both well. What did you make of Max's sort of body language and that kind of slightly fraught nature that he had, certainly on the Saturday with George?
Yeah, I think he. It was a really tough one to understand, because looking at the performance gaps in qualifying and where they're finding lap time, Checo was just in one of those weekends where he was absolutely in the groove. He didn't set a wheel wrong. He was very, very comfortable with the car on a place like Ant said. It's super high risk, high reward type of circuit. Like, you saw how many people are flirting with the barriers at 15. A lot of people, as you said, finding the apex, finding too much of it. He did none of it. There may be a couple taps of the wall here, but it was awesome. Max really looked like he was not having a good time with the very low speed section through the castle. Like, he was losing lots of time there, didn't have confidence getting the entry done to 15, which is where Leclerc really shined on Friday. I think we're race 4 in. Can Checo? I mean, Checo's 6 points behind in the championship. Or is that including the sprint?
Yes, it is 6 points.
Yeah.
So he's there. If he can hang on to it and not have one of those dips like he had at the end of 2022, after the break in 22, something happened. And there was the whole narrative of, they've developed the car for Max. But having developed, all the way from 2015 to 21 cars and 22 cars in the simulator, I don't ever remember seeing one of those things where you're pushing to help develop the car for the lead driver. Both of the drivers are giving feedback, and more often, you're actually spending time looking at solutions to find the driver. Like, for example, when Albon and Gasly were struggling with the car, we spent a lot of time trying to find stuff to help them out, to understand where their performance deficits are to Max. How can you get more stability in the car for them so they can attack harder? And that was one of the things that Max could cope with quite well. So I think Checo's got as good a shot as he does any year. And Max is a very difficult measuring stick to go up against. Like, he's a very tough teammate, and it's the only person you've got to beat is your teammate.
I was going to ask on the Albon and Gasly example you've just given, how do drivers react to going up against Max? Do they see it as this kind of mountain, unachievable sort of thing, and they're trying everything to try and get close to him? Or what's the kind of psyche of those drivers?
They never think it's unachievable, and that's the whole point. That's why you're in that position in the first place, is because that's your job, is to beat that guy, or that's the goal. So it's not unachievable, but looking at stuff and say, here's the data. Can you carry 5 kilometers an hour extra speed on the entry to this corner? And they tell you no, and you're like, well, your teammate in the exact same machinery is able to do that. You're going to have to find a way, or you're going to have to accept it, that he's just going to keep, getting those couple hundredths away from you every time you go into a corner like this. And sometimes they accept it and sometimes they don't. But we've also got other...
Brutal.
Yeah, it is. But we've also got other variables. It's not always your weekend. Sometimes you go off on a wrong foot on your starting setup and you never recover. So, there's always, you have to make the most of those opportunities, but sometimes it is quite brutal. But Checo's been, especially this weekend, especially on it. And it's hopefully it continues like this, because it'll be a little bit of excitement at the front, because we do have gaps forming throughout the rest of the field, which, I think for everybody else's enjoyment makes it a little bit less.
And how would you react in that situation if you were paired with Max Verstappen? What would you be doing in your preparation to make sure you were in the best possible position to take the fight to him?
It's an interesting one, picking up on what Rachel said, because I could read that body language as well from the outside, and I felt like we're seeing a little bit of a difference in Sergio this year. To start with, he's a bit more steely, a bit more determined. And really interesting that you've picked up on that, firsthand there at the circuit, Rachel, because I think this is what he needs to do. And I think he realises that he's come to this crossroads now this season already. It's hit him pretty hard in that he's got the car to do it. This new car from Red Bull this season seems to suit his style better. He's getting more in bed with the team and in bed with how the car feels. It takes some time, and it only takes a few little tweaks here and there from season to season for a driver to really find their niche, the sweet spot, and in how they can get the most out of the car to extrapolate all that performance. And I think he knows he's there. Sure, like Rach said, there are circuits that Max is going to come to later this year. Your Zandvoorts, your Interlagoses, the Silverstones, the Suzukas, where Max is going to shine. We all know it. He knows it as well. So what do? You've got to be more Rosberg 2016. That's what you've got to do.
And a street fighter, which is what he's being, isn't it?
I was always told, and probably rightly so as well, from team bosses in my F1 time, I was too nice. And I think they're right. I think that's what made me a much better sports car driver. I was more of a team player, always was. And I think now it's time for Sergio to stop being Mr. Nice Guy. He's got to take a leaf out of Rosberg 2016, and maybe, as much as it might hurt to be the guy that he doesn't want really to be, he's got to make sacrifices and decisions this season that might go the way that his family doesn't want him to go. He might have to take himself away, what Rosberg did. He might have to say things to the team they don't want him to say, or he necessarily feels comfortable in saying. He's got to get under Max Verstappen's skin. He's got to annoy him. He's got to get this is his moment. It might only be his one chance. I think he knows it. We all know it as well. He's so close to 6 points behind after 4 races, and he's looking good. I don't think he'll be able to do it if he plays Mr. Nice Guy this year.
Rach, what's Max been like to interview over the years? Have you seen a change in him that maybe this year compared to sort of now he's obviously double world champion?
Not this year from last year. I remember in 2021, at the very start of the season at testing in Bahrain, being told that he'd come back from the winter almost a different person. He was so happy in his home life. He was so confident. He was just calmer. He was just focused. It was a different Max. So I wasn't surprised to see that transfer on track. Okay, he had a fantastic car, but also he just pulled it all together last year, continued that run. The only thing I would say was I got a feeling on Saturday evening after the sprint, the way he talked about the incident with George, the incident itself with George, where he didn't pull out of it. And then he said afterwards, well, when you've got nothing to gain or whatever, why in George's position would you push me out that wide? And I said to him, well, turn that on its head. You've got everything to lose. And you still went in and carried on as hard when you knew a lap later you could have had him. And that was more likely what was going to happen. And I felt almost as if there was a tiny bit of the old Max creeping back in there now that he's under pressure from Checo. In those desperate moves, that element of desperation that came in the past with Max, but that he seemed to have got rid of. And experience taught him to be patient. You've got a great car. This is going to be your season. Just bide your time. And that tiny bit of desperation that came in on Saturday, I felt was a tiny bit of the old Max creeping back in. But then on Sunday, after the race, his body language, his demeanour was completely different. And he said it's a great day for the team and it's positive. And I think he'd got the new Max back in his head again. And he was like, I just need to calm down. It's a long season. I know there are races that are going to come to me and I just need to bide my time. But at just a moment on Saturday where I thought, that's the old Max creeping back in a tiny bit. But by Sunday, it had gone. And that's experience, isn't it? That's age. That's good people around you telling you that calm down, bide your time. It's going to come.